taking time in your evening. Welcome to the second of our 4 Reentry and Advocacy forums. Last week, we had Beth Hines, I think it was last week. She did her kickoff with Mayors Justin Elliker and Joe Gainham, along with our panelists who are Tahiba Bain, Daryl McGraw, Gus Marks Hamilton, Alicia Gay, and Julia Wilcox. If you did miss it, you can reach out to Molly Shapiro for a link to the recording. You should know the Connecticut Reentry Collaborative Policy Working Group, made up of service providers and advocates from the 10 reentry roundtables. We seek to consolidate and coordinate the efforts of various organizations and stakeholders, working on the behalf of returning citizens in order to maximize our impact and achieve legislative improvements for the reentry community statewide. We have spent the last several months listening to one another and to representatives from advocacy organizations to hear about the issues that we see as the most pressing in reentry today. After months of such conversations, we put together a list of short and long-term legislative priorities for which we will advocate in 2021 and onward around employment, housing, and voting rights. Tonight we'll be focusing on issues of employment, specifically 2 pieces of legislation that seek to eliminate some of the barriers that exist for returning citizens seeking jobs: clean slate and anti-discrimination in employment. We'll first hear from our esteemed panel about the employment barriers that returning citizens face in Connecticut and the legislation being introduced in 2021 to change this reality. We will use our remaining time to join together and take action to advocate on behalf of Clean Slate, a bill you will learn more about throughout the evening. I'll be introducing our panelists and myself, and then we'll open up to audience questions toward the end of the discussion. Many of you may know me. My name is Rob Hebert. I'm the Senior Vice President at Career Resources. I cover business development and reentry affairs. But tonight, I come to you as the co-chair of the Bridgeport Reentry Roundtable, the first of the 10 councils that are now exist in our state. And with that, I'll let you guys know that we have with us tonight Kirk Wesley from Congregations Organized for New Connecticut, or Connect. Mark Soicher, formerly from CBIA, the Connecticut Business and Industry Association. Anderson Curtis, Smart Justice Field Organizer for the ACLU. Doug Wade, owner and CEO of Wade's Dairy and long-term reentry second chance employer. And Scott X. Esdale, president of Connecticut NAACP. With that, I'm going to open up questions to who are we going to start with? Scott X, sir. I haven't seen Scott X yet. Is he here?
I'm here.
Okay, there he is. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing fine. How are you, sir?
I'm good. The NAACP recently launched the 1 Million Jobs campaign, which seeks to keep returning citizens out of prisons with job training and employment resources. Can you talk about the impetus for this campaign and its current progress in Connecticut?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I'd like to give greetings to each and every one of you during Black History Month on behalf of the NAACP. We are the largest and oldest civil rights organization in the world. We were founded in 1909. Actually, February 12th was our 112th year of existence. We have over 500,000 members worldwide, and we have 2,200 branches worldwide. In Connecticut, we have 16 branches, 8 youth councils, and 8 college units. So we have about 32 units in the state of Connecticut. I'm from New Haven, Connecticut, but my office is in Hartford, Connecticut, which supervises the 32 units across the state. I'm also a national board member of the NAACP, representing from Delaware to Maine. And when I'm on the national board, we have certain committees, and I'm the National Criminal Justice Chairman of the NAACP. So this is pretty much in my purview. And I would say, I've been involved in the NAACP over the last 34 years. Very, very active in Connecticut and all throughout the nation. And I've observed in cities like Chicago, LA, Miami-Dade, Miami, Baltimore, pretty much the major urban areas. This complaint of young people from our communities coming out of prison, and they talk about training, and no job. Training, and no job. They go to all these trainings, get all these certificates, and at the end of it, there's no job. So People would come into my office, my young brothers and sisters, they're talking about they cut their braids off, they covered their tattoos, they wear a shirt and tie every day. And I went through all these different trainings, and at the end of all these different trainings, still no job. So I started to delve into striving to find out exactly what was going on. And I knew that the NAACP had some great relationships with major companies and corporations. And they would give us like a $5,000 or $10,000 check at our local Freedom Fund dinners, but they weren't really creating a real solid partnership with us and dealing with the problems that our community was facing. So I had a conversation with, at that time, Dan Malloy, who was the governor at that particular time, and he was a former prosecutor. And he knew that a lot of the individuals that were in jail were Black and brown people. They were arrested during the mass incarceration era during the crack epidemic. And he saw how the opiate crisis was being dealt with differently in the suburbs. And individuals were not getting hit with real hard time like individuals from the communities that we represent. And we had a lot of dialogue and conversation. There was a lot of dialogue and conversation across the state about how the prison system should be downsized. So at 1986, it was probably about, I would say, and I know that I'm get this short, but in 1986, there were 6,000 people incarcerated, went up to like 24,000, and Dan Malloy wanted to get it down to 13,000. He did do that, but the majority of those individuals are coming into our communities that we serve, Black and brown communities. And we're like, where are the jobs for these individuals? Governor Lamont wants to now get it down to, I think, around 8,000 or 9,000 people. So you're talking about 14 to 15,000 individuals coming back to the communities that we serve. And once again, we still had this issue about training, and no jobs. So there's pretty much 70 million people that have been affected by the criminal justice system with some type of blemish on their record. So when I sat down with the National Board of Directors, I told them that I wanted to start this Million Jobs campaign. They said, well, why don't you start it in Connecticut first? So the numbers go like this real quickly. When you look at 1 million jobs, and once again, 70 million people have been affected nationwide. And we have approximately, and I'm rounding off the numbers, that we have approximately about 300 million people in America. So in California, when we look at the 1 million jobs, they're pretty much around 12% of the nation. So we try to get 120,000 jobs in California. In Texas, Texas has about 10%, so we'll try to get about 100,000 jobs in Texas. When we go to New York is probably about 8%, so we got to get 80,000 jobs there. Connecticut is 1% of America, because we have approximately around 3 million. Once again, I'm rounding off the numbers. About 3 million people in our state. And once again, 300 million people in America, rounding off the numbers. So we're closely approximately around 1% of the nation. So we would try to get 1% of the 1 million jobs, which would be 10,000 jobs. And that would be emblematical of what we could do across the country. So where are the jobs in Connecticut? Pretty much the #1 employers in the state of Connecticut since the factories have left and gone overseas are the hospitals. #2 is the advanced manufacturing in the state. So during COVID, we got hit very hard in reference to our plans, so we had to make some adjustments. But since then, we've signed agreements with the Connecticut Hospital Association, which covers all 27 hospitals across the state of Connecticut, with the leading hospitals, Hartford Hospital, Yale New Haven Hospital Systems, Trinity Hospital Systems, UConn Medical Health, I said Children's Hospital. Pretty much we've signed MOU agreements with all the major hospitals across the state of Connecticut. And we looked for an example in the nation. We went down to Johns Hopkins Hospital. Johns Hopkins Hospital has about 45,000 individuals in their network. We went down and met with the CEO, met with the head of security. We met with the head of human resources. And in that dialogue and conversation, we found out that out of the 45,000 individuals that they have in their network, 10% of the individuals have been formerly incarcerated at Johns Hopkins Hospital. So about 4,500 people to 5,000 have been formerly incarcerated in the Johns Hopkins Hospital network. So we wanted to take that program and bring it to the state of Connecticut. This is the first time that it'll be executed and implemented throughout the state. We're starting the first week of March, maybe the second week of March. We still have some things to iron out. And then we're going to be starting in New Haven. Then we go to Hartford. Then we go to Bridgeport, Waterbury, and then New London. So those are the first 5 cities. And then we're going to expand it into other cities across the state. There's approximately about 100,000 jobs in healthcare across the state of Connecticut. So we're starting at 5% with the intention to move up to 10%. And then we're also going to be going into the advanced manufacturing space, retail, construction, transportation, and on and on. So it's been taking a while due to the fact of COVID, but we're still pushing, we're still fighting. We got some great agreements, and everything is going very well. So we're looking at, we're real excited about launching the program the first or second week of March.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Esdale.
I know it took a long time. I apologize, but.
That's all right. That's all right. No worries. Mr. Anderson Curtis.
Hello, everyone.
There he is. How are you, sir?
Good.
Our
Scott,
question-
man, excellent job with your efforts, Scott.
Thank you, my friend.
Anderson, my question for you tonight, you testified in 2020, quote, "We are sick and tired of living with the uncertainty of never knowing when our past will be held against us. Barriers to reentry are killing us." Can you talk about some of the barriers that you personally faced related to employment, and especially about this additional factor of uncertainty that you mentioned in your testimony?
Sure. I'm going to borrow a few words from Reginald Dwayne Betts. He has a book out called Felon, Collection of Poems. This is an essay on reentry. Of prison, no one tells you the time will steal your memories until there's nothing left but strip searches, the whole fights, hidden shakes, and spade games. You come home and become a parade of confessions that leave you drowning, lost recounting the disappearing years. You say, fuck this world where background checks like your fingerprints announce the crime, where so much of who you are betrays guilt older than you, your pops, uncles, a brother, 2 cousins, and enough childhood friends for a game of throwback. All learned absurdities from shackles. But we wear the mask that grins and lies. Why pretend these words don't seize our breath? Prisoner, inmate, felon, convict. I myself have been out of incarceration going into 14 years and still deal with the personal side effects of all that. You know, even as being employed at the ACLU and having resources at my disposal, I struggled to grasp the concept that I could go get an apartment on my own. And so, you know, I'm not too proud to talk about my struggles, but, you know, my story is not unique. There are men and women all across the state of Connecticut who every day navigate this criminal legal system, whether they're on parole, probation, or they come home end of sentence. And when I say navigate, they have to navigate the fact that they have a criminal record, and that criminal record comes with over 600 collateral consequences. Many of them are unseen. And quite frankly, you don't know who they are until you actually run into them. And so the time is now. 2021, the time is now. To me, we lost a year last year. Yes, we did get the police ability bill passed, but you know, there's other things and other impacts. Scott was talking about the jobs, but also what does a welcoming community come home to? Where's the housing? Where's the dignity? Where's the hope? Resources that were already meager are even shrunk further, and the challenges and the barriers are exacerbated by COVID. So quite frankly, you know, enough for the rhetoric. There's enough people on this call to really put forth an effort to change the conversation, like Scott said, right here in Connecticut. This is where we can start right here. We're all residents of the state. We're all involved in this process. And we all know, we all have networks. And so, you know, I can go on and on about loss, you know, people struggling, barriers, but most importantly, where are the solutions? There's some solutions that can be done through policy. There's some solutions that could be done through employment campaigns like Scott's, but there are also solutions that have to come from people's hearts. People across the state of Connecticut have to begin treating people with a criminal record like people. What does a welcoming community look like? Whether it's New Haven, Hartford, New London, wherever it may be. So that is my challenge. You know, one of the smart justice values that everyone has a role in ending mass incarceration. And I challenge everyone on this call to not only think about what their role is, but to also talk to people in their network about what can you do now? Whether it's talking to your legislator, whether it's talking to where you go to buy your bread at, or you go to buy your coffee. And you just ask the person, are you willing to hire somebody with a criminal record? Because I think that's important. That's important to me. Let the dialogue be the star. Let the dialogue be what's important. Let the dialogue shine. And people need to talk and, more importantly, act. And so I'm here at the ACLU. I'm going to put my number, my email in the chat. My colleague, Gus Marks Hamilton, is a campaign manager now. He's going to put his email in there, and we're willing to work with anybody who wants to contact us, whether it's setting up jobs, whether it's answering calls for people who come home about situations they have, navigating this criminal legal system, because some people are still on parole. But anyway, thank you for your time. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Anderson. And if you don't know Gus, he's sitting on Anderson's left shoulder. He's the only person that gets to be on the panel twice. Good job, Gus. Thanks, Anderson. Next, we have Mark Soicher, a former counsel from CBIA, and I'm proud to say a board member of Career Resources now. Evening, Mark.
Good evening, Rob. Glad to be here.
You said in 2019, I'll give you a quote of yours, I've come to believe that hiring people with a record may be a better path in many cases and a better bet for success. Can you explain what you meant by this and how you see anti-discrimination in employment legislation as a path to ensure more fair hiring practices in Connecticut?
Well, in my about 25 years total working at CBIA as an employment lawyer, working with businesses throughout the state of Connecticut, giving them guidance, best practices, trying to keep them out of their lawyer's office on hiring practices, firing practices, things like that. What I came to observe is that we're talking about a lot of misbehavior in the workplace, lack of initiative, lack of engagement on the job. And these are all people without criminal records. And so I think that, you know, why not try another path, especially over the last 3 years or so since I've gotten engaged in the efforts in this area. I've seen the energy and the intellect and the guidance and wisdom being put into these programs. And employers are getting great products when they work with all of these different groups. They're not just hiring someone who comes on their own, they're hiring someone who comes with a community behind them. And it's those types of supports that employers have to learn about, become educated, and realize. And therefore, it's not you know what they say, the other. They attach a label to people and assume everyone has the same characteristics. They're working with a population that's really motivated, getting guidance, things like that. And what I've seen and hearing from employers that have gone down this path, describing the great successes, hearing stories from the workers that have gone down that path as well. and succeeded in the workplaces. As far as the anti-discrimination legislation, clean slate, and the like, I think there was such great momentum in 2019, and then COVID kind of put a shot to the knees in knocking out a lot of the energy that was going on with all of this. Nonetheless, I know there have been continuing efforts in those areas, but I think we have to reach back to the end of 2019 and look at the progress that had been made and somehow jumpstart all of that. What I've seen, I wasn't a lobbyist at CDIA, but I did work closely with the lobbyists. And, in this area, I'd say legislative proposals, that's almost the easy part. If you think about the volume of laws that we have that say you can't do this, you can't do that. And if you do this, this is going to happen to you. We've got the CHRO, the EEOC, lawsuits, things like that. There's still discrimination. There's still lack of opportunity. That certainly does present the stick side of the equation. But the real side is the carrot side, the engagement. And reaching back to the end of 2019 and the limited but nonetheless still vibrant activity that's occurred through 2020, there's all the different groups that are going on. Reentry councils, chambers of commerce, CBIA, obviously, SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, an organization of HR professionals that I've been involved with, the Connecticut educational system. There's a lot of people involved with those organizations that need to be drawn back into the groups like the Industry and Business Advisory Group that had met as part of an effort to examine a lot of the underlying issues that are presenting barriers. The Council on Collateral Consequences that met through some legislative oversight, and I was participating in the employment subcommittee of that group. They set out a great roadmap on some recommendations that need to be fine-tuned and start to chip away at that. There's a pathway there. We need to engage people from the employer side that I'm referring to, chambers of commerce, HR people, SHRM, clearly CBIA, and I know there's interest in pursuing some of these efforts through CBIA, but looking at those barriers and starting to chip away at them. We'll only succeed by getting people engaged in this. Bringing employers into the reentry councils, they're ideally situated geographically to draw in companies from those areas and not only meet those service providers like career resources, entry point staffing, all of the nonprofits, but also meet some of the individual workers who are looking for opportunities, who can make that elevated pitch at those meetings. People from corrections, the education program within the correctional system, to start to see and learn about the types of resources that are being committed to this effort. And then public officials clearly as well, community representatives. This chips away at the state budget, puts tax dollars back into the communities, things like that. One of the projects that got started back then that needs to be revived again is employer education, a toolkit for employers that educates them about how to balance their legal compliance obligations, not to discriminate, but also to minimize risk, to go through proper interviewing procedures, things like that. Choosing reliable background companies. People are still going to be doing background checks. And then learning about the rewards for hiring what I would call fair chance workers. And then best practices for onboarding. A lot of stuff to do there, but there's a god awful lot of people involved with this. And no one's going to be putting all of this on their shoulders. But by drawing all of these people in, you start to get to know all the people involved. A lot of pie in the sky stuff here, but I've seen a lot of smiles at these meetings, and progress can be made. And the more we start to, get past COVID, state economy is percolating under the surface, ready to explode like it was in 2019. Manufacturers have not shut down; they've continued operating in large part, and some really great paying jobs, opportunities there. And you bring in some of those employers that have succeeded with those efforts, and those are going to be the best salespeople. We can, as I think Anderson and Scott were saying, we can polish up the product. We can fine tune the skill sets, but we got to have buyers. and got to bring them to the table as well. And they're going to be looking for workers as they were in the last year or so. So I'll stop there for the time being, and hopefully the conversation continues.
Thanks, Mark. I'm glad you mentioned the education of employers. I sidebar, I've been personally doing job placement for folks with criminal histories for over 10 years now, and it's astonishing how much they don't know. So there's a lot of work to be done there.
And they're receptive to the education. They're
Yep.
not going to be resistant on that, but they need to have the light turned on and show them the path.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Next, we have Doug Wade. How are you, Mr. Wade? It's good to see you, as usual. Doug Wade's the owner of Wade's Dairy, as I said before. Our question for you, Mr. Wade, you're the owner and operator of Wade's Dairy in Bridgeport, which hires many formerly incarcerated individuals. Can you talk about your hiring process and your experience working with men and women who've been impacted by the justice system over the time that you've been managing the business?
Well, about 5 years back, we were expanding. We had received a economic development loan from the DECD, and we had a commitment that we were going to bring on 29 full-time people as part of that money that was loaned to us. And so I was actively looking for good people to join us, and we were expanding, putting up a new warehouse facility. And I had served on the board of directors for the Council of Churches of Greater Bridgeport, and Dan Braccio was working with formerly incarcerated people, and he would say, hey, I've got this person I think would be really good for your facility. And sure enough, they'd come down, I'd interview the person personally and get the full background information. And we put together a team in our warehouse, and I think we hired 6 formerly incarcerated people to work in our warehouse. And this is not the easiest job in the world, but I've got the hardest working people that, just give me their heart and soul. Some of them are making $50,000 a year. They're good paying jobs. They work very hard. They've trained and gotten experienced on forklift equipment and machinery. And I wish I could hire more people, but none of these people want to leave our employ. They are very dedicated, hardworking, and I can't believe that more employers don't see the opportunity for these people that have been formerly incarcerated. They, are just looking for that chance. And if you open your heart, you give them an opportunity, and you just embrace it. They have been fabulous for me in the hiring process. And are you going to get a bad apple? Yes, you can get a bad apple, but the vast majority of the people that I have hired have been A1. They're still with me, all right, and I am just very proud that I've done what I've done in helping others because they've helped me sevenfold. All right, so I've just had a very good experience, and I just can't fathom that other employers would not look at the labor pool and say, wow, these are people untapped, and you don't know what you're going to find there. It's been a very good experience for Wade's Dairy.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. And you should know that Doug Wade, I think it was 2 years, it must have been 2 years ago, because we didn't have a reentry ceremony last year, was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Bridgeport Reentry Collaborative for his work in second chance hiring. So thank you for that again, Doug.
Thank you, Rob.
Just for the audience also, a lot of questions going up in the chat. Just as a reminder, we'll sort of cherry pick some of those out. We obviously will not be able to get to all of them. We only have an hour's time. We'll get to that shortly. Last but not least, Kirk Wesley from Connect. How are you, sir?
Great. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for joining us. I know you're busy. My question for you is, you've been helping to lead Connect's efforts to pass Clean Slate this legislative session. Can you tell us about what this bill entails and why it is so necessary? And I have a follow-up after.
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, thank you again for having me. Appreciate the invitation. So happy to be here with this esteemed panel. So in short, Clean Slate is the bill that will lead to a path to, that will create a path to automatic expungement for individuals who may have been convicted of misdemeanors and certain level felonies. We believe that a criminal record should not be a lifetime sentence, and the many barriers that were already discussed at length here are all the more reason as to why Clean Slate is so important. So having said that, currently, Clean Slate, there is no formal bill from the Judicial Committee and no guidelines or outlines for what it will entail. But we are believing that the Clean Slate legislation will follow SB 403 from last session 2020, the Clean Slate bill that was proposed then, and that would be automatic expungement of misdemeanors 7 years after the date of conviction, and automatic expungement of Class C, D, and E felonies 12 years after the date of conviction. And this does not include domestic or family violence crimes or sex offenses and Class A and B felonies. People with these convictions will still need to apply to the boards of pardons and parole. But why is Clean Slate important? Clean Slate is super important, again, for all the reasons that the panel described, but, Clean Slate gives people back a sense of dignity. Like, it's about employment, it's about housing, it's about opportunity, but it's about dignity and giving people their life back. I mean, there's, as someone that was a returning citizen and got my pardon in 2018, I know how it can be deflating to work so hard to achieve certain things and get places in life, but only to be held back by the worst moment in your life. So Clean Slate offers people a chance to, in many ways, erase that moment from their life and gives you a fresh start. It gives you opportunity that otherwise are shut off from you. And I think it goes without saying that Clean Slate is a racial justice issue. We look at, in Connecticut, Black people are 9 times more likely to be incarcerated than white people. Latinx people 4 times more likely than white people. Clearly, it's not because Black or Latinx people are committing more crimes. It's clearly a system that, is set up for that, and we can go deeper into that, but we don't have enough time. So ultimately, this is something that is a racial justice issue, but it's an economic justice issue as well. As Mr. Wade was just saying, this is an untapped pool and resources of people who, once they get stable employment, will be loyal and dedicated to the employer who took a chance on them. But again, it's the restoration of dignity and humanity for people who sometimes have been stripped of that from the moment of being arrested through trial, through incarceration and reentry. So Clean Slate is something that will help to restore just the humanity that people seek for on a day-to-day life.
And Kurt, do you know where the judicial bill is at this point? It's stuck somewhere?
It's still in committee. So it's still being worked its way through committee. The language is still being framed. There are a couple other legislators who have presented a different version or their version of Clean Slate, but we've been working with the judiciary chairs, Senator Winfield and Rep. Staffstrom, so we're waiting for them to produce that version.
All right, thank you. I have on my agenda here, Kirk, that there was an advocacy action moment from Connect that you were going to be sharing with us.
Rob,
Yeah.
we're going to go to that after the questions, if that's all right.
After the questions?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll just turn to audience questions briefly. We have about 10
Got
minutes for that. And I know
As you all know, Molly Shapiro is the boss tonight.
we have a question from Kim Sabino. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your last name. Kim, if you want to unmute yourself to share it, feel free.
The question about why it would take so long to have a clean slate?
I believe so. I saw you also had one for Douglas Wade, so whichever you prefer.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Wade, I'm wondering if you go and speak to other employers, encouraging them to hire formerly incarcerated people, because we can all be on this forum, but we all want that same thing. And the other thing is, why would the clean, not for you, Mr. Wade, but for the other gentleman that was talking, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, about the clean slate. 7 to 12 years is such a long time for an expungement. I don't have a record, and I have a job, and I don't have a problem finding a job, and I can't imagine having to wait 7 to 12 years to have a record be expunged. That's crazy.
Say it again, Kim. Say it again.
I mean, we all know that. So why would it be proposed to be so long?
Right, thank you. So maybe we can start with you, Doug, and then go over to Kirk.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to anyone that would want to hear my story, because it's a good story. You know, I mean, I speak the truth. You know, I've had a very positive experience, and it's shameful that other employers would not want to take advantage of this. You know, I think if they realize that, you know, formerly incarcerated people have served their due time, a lot of the things that happen, you know, happened at a much younger age. And, you know, I speak to this frequently that, you know, I grew up in white privilege. The things that I did as a teenager didn't haunt me the rest of my life. You know, I mean, you got kind of a free pass sometimes. And, you know, the stories that I take the time to interview new employees and hear their story. And, you know, very often it's things that I didn't get in trouble for, or not in as deep a trouble for. So, yes, I'd be happy to speak to anyone that wants to hear, you know, my story here at Wade's Dairy and the people that we employ, and, you know, the good things that have happened to us, because we've been on a good rising tide. And I give that for all the people that I've hired and the good team that we have in place now.
Great, and we'll go over to Kirk, and please send all questions in the chat. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, you know, thanks for raising that question, and I'm gonna try to answer the best way that I can, right? You know, especially from someone who got a pardon, right? So, you know, there are a couple of responses in the chat. Someone says 7 years later is better than never, and yes, this is something that we're trying to realistically try to get past. But, you know, frankly, the way it's set up now, you have to wait 8 years until the end of your sentence. So that means after you've done your time incarceration, your parole, your probation, you have to wait 8 years after that. So this is talking about 7 years from conviction. Right? So yes, no, I wish it could be tomorrow. I wish it could be the day you get out of prison. The day you get out of prison, you can get your pardon, or you have a clean slate. But this is 7 years after conviction, which means that as soon as you're convicted of a crime, that clock starts. So you might do some time, you might get some probation, whatever, but the clock starts, which is an improvement from the current way it is now. And again, we are putting forth legislation that needs to be, you know, this is something that has to gain our bipartisan support, which is why, again, I think that, you know, when we talk about this, we need to really kind of tap into the fact that this is an economic issue. This is something that can stimulate our local and state economy. So when we talk about the time frame and things like that, yes, from conviction versus from the end of sentence is a huge distinction in when the time clock starts.
Thanks, Kirk.
Oh,
No.
Mark has something over there. Sorry, Mark.
Molly, I would just note, as valuable as that will be, you know, listening to Doug, he's someone who's hiring people with eyes wide open. He knows their background when they come in, and that's another parallel path that needs to be pursued aggressively to bring more people in like that. Because I think what I've heard from some employers is, and I think there was a comment in the chat column about someone who got quite a ways through the employment, the hiring process. And then at some point before starting the job, their criminal record came out. And in some respects, it's blindsiding the employer, who then needs that education at a date when they're conflicted because of the information coming in. So as good as it is to bury the past and move past it, that comes up sometimes. And I think we need to work as aggressively on the employer education side to open their minds and hearts to the benefits of the process, and the fact that they're not getting a single commodity. It's not someone with a record. It's an individual who's done something wrong in the past, but that doesn't define them. And they need to start to look at, through the background screening process, the interview process, all of the other strengths the person brings to the job.
Great, thank you.
That's a great point, Mark. And I like Kurt's point too, that this is also an economic justice issue, right? Because people employed and housed is great for public safety for everyone in the state of Connecticut. And so there are parallel paths. There's employment now. There's a path going on with Clean Slate. There's a path with the Board of Pardons and Parole. But quite frankly, to me, that's what we can do here in Connecticut, is redefine public safety as housing and employing the 95% of people that will be coming home from incarceration. And the majority of those people are Black and brown. So also there is a race issue involved. And so there are many things coming into play at one time. And there are many factors, Kurt, and I do respect what you're doing. And again, this is a much bigger dialogue than everybody on this call. We have to continue to push it forward.
All right, Anderson, I'm going to keep you up there because we have one more question before I yield back to Rob from NANI, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
So my name is Nani. I'm from the Connecticut Alliance Against Sexual Violence. I'm really also uplifting something that I forget what their name is, but I think Gerald said. But I'm wondering if y'all can speak to how the quality of employment is tied to someone's record and their kind of quality of life. A lot of the jobs that people get when they leave incarceration, or if they have a criminal record, is often minimum wage jobs, but that doesn't allow them to have a fully dignified life, or keeps them competitive in our world is already really competitive as is. What are the ways that y'all are thinking about this, or perhaps doing maybe legal work around this?
Anderson, you want to maybe start us off with that one?
I'm going to turn to what Scott was talking about earlier. The manufacturing division that are hiring people. There's programs at Goodwin College where people are being trained. There's programs that people are doing while they're incarcerated. But quite frankly, there aren't enough. There's jobs out there, but are they livable wage jobs? Can you actually come out of a halfway house, secure employment, save money for a deposit? In New Haven, that would be almost $3,000, So yes, there are jobs out there, but are there jobs that people can really solidly rebuild their life on? Yes, we all have to start somewhere, but there's a job, there's a livable wage, and there's actually what's going on. And sometimes those things don't always add up. So people do struggle with employment. People have been willing to start where they are. I myself, right, even with an associate's degree from Gateway in addiction counseling, had lulls of employment. Some of it was my own doing, other was policy. Agencies would not hire me because I had a criminal record. They hired me to work with people in their criminal justice division, but they would not hire me directly. They hired me as a contractor. So there's some rhetoric, but at the end of the day, let's all be true to who we are here in Connecticut and really push forward to have those conversations with employers that are willing to hire people now and put Connecticut back to work.
Within the employer community and the state education community, there's an organization at CDIA called Ready CT that's working to coordinate what employers are looking for and educate the educational community about what the skill sets that are needed, and to collaborate between those two groups. Those same concepts need to be applied to the internal education program in the correctional system in the state, and through some of the nonprofit organizations that are speaking to those coming out of incarceration and speaking to them about not just a job, but a career path. And it may require starting at a lower wage, but with developing skill sets and seeing a pathway to more advanced employment opportunities. Those are some of the steps that are working successfully with the state's higher education community to fine-tune the skills that they're getting students to focus on. And that same concept needs to be applied to the population coming out of incarceration. Some of those individuals are highly intelligent. They've got great skills. They have even, in some cases, some job experience that's not properly being packaged when they come to prospective employers. So working on fine-tuning the educational process so that it's not just that job.
And I also want to add that, you know, when I'm an organizer with Connect, but I'm also a small business owner, you know what I mean? And before I was an organizer with Connect, I was a small business owner. When I couldn't get a job because of 2 first-degree robberies, I had to start a landscaping and cleaning business. And I had to build that business to a point where I could hire other formerly incarcerated individuals as well. So, you know, jobs, we're talking about jobs, we're talking about careers and things like that, super important. But we also should be like emphasizing entrepreneurship for some of these brothers and sisters coming out of incarceration, you know, because, you know, some of the best minds are behind prison walls. Some of the best business minds are behind those walls and are coming home and have the capacity to start successful businesses, but don't have the training or the wherewithal to be able to translate the drug factory that they ran in their local community into a sustainable business. So that's another aspect that we should talk about in terms of reentry and employment is self-employment and making sure people have the capacity to be able to like do their own thing if necessary.
Thanks, everybody. Kirk. I know there's somebody in the audience here I wanted to give some airtime to. Mr. Joe Carbone is with us from the Workplace. He's the CEO of the Workplace in Bridgeport. Really, they're everywhere at this point. Mr. Carbone, how are you this evening? Sure. Is he still with us, Molly? I can't see the board.
I think he might be muted. I'm going to ask to unmute.
All right. Let's have him figure out the mute, and we'll run with Kirk right now. We'll come back to Joe.
Okay, Kirk, over to you for our advocacy action. Yeah,
great. Thanks again for having me, and thank you for the engagement with the panel and the audience. Because I'm solution-based and oriented, you know, I want to leave us all with something that we all can tangibly do around this issue. Clean slate is not the silver bullet, it's not the magic bullet or wand to solve this holistic problem, but it's a part of the solution that could help to change the lives of many people in this state. So we're asking you to reach out to your legislator, and we've made it very, very simple for you to reach out to your local legislator for a letter of support in Clean Slate for this session. So Molly just put the link in the chat. This link will lead you directly to a form where you'll put in some basic information like your name, your address, and it would automatically generate a letter to your local legislator, depending on the address that you give, and you can send this letter off in support of Clean Slate. We're asking you all to click that link and do that now, We also have a toolkit that we'll send out after this call, and for an email that you can also send to legislators as well, in the Judiciary Committee, as we're looking to get a strong clean slate bill out of Judiciary Committee. So click that link in the chat, fill out that form, and get your advocacy on. Thank you again.
Thanks so much, Kirk. And I think Mr. Carbone figured out how to unmute himself. So we'll go over to you while they all do the advocacy action.
Yeah, I mean, I must tell you, technology is really getting baffling sometimes. But thank you very much. And I'm sorry that I took some time here being muted up. But this has been a great, interesting program thus far. And my gratitude to the speakers, Scott Isdale. We at the workplace are one of his early partners in this. And, it just seems, I remember going to a meeting and he had every hospital in Connecticut that was present. He brought down the chief administrator from Johns Hopkins, gentleman from Laz, who's on the national board of the NAACP. It's an assemblage of folks of great stature and authority. It gives me confidence. I hear my friend Doug Wade, and you got to be confident that this is different this time, that we can expect some extraordinary actions, things that maybe 2 or 3 years ago would not have been possible, that this economy and this time and this America, I think, are going to make possible. I just talked to Mayor Ganem a moment ago about this, and I thanked him for being an inspiration for us. We run Platform to Employment Reentry. It's a pilot program in Connecticut. It plays the market. It basically says to employers, we're making you a deal you can't refuse. You have no risk. The program is producing about 70% success. There is a way to do it. You just got to find it, and the atmosphere has to be right, and it is right now. So let's all go forward with all we got. We can win this. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for coming tonight. Molly, do I have a few minutes?
Yes, you're good.
I would be remiss if I didn't welcome Mayor Joe Ganem. Thank you, Mayor, for showing up. Do you want a few minutes?
I spoke last and really listened today, and I think I mentioned in the comments, it really feels like there's the group, the Reentry Collaborative is got momentum and a real focus. And speaking of legislators, Steve Stashman was mentioned earlier, co-chair of Judiciary. When I started talking to him about this, I didn't realize how engaged he was, meaning the legislators get it and want to make a difference. Kurt, I think, laid out, how difficult the pardon process is in Connecticut. Joe Carbone just hit the nail on the head. And the groups that are here, the people that are represented, do so much for so many already. But coming together on this, I'm really, I don't want to say excited, but inspired, I think is the word I used about the efforts and the momentum. So thanks, and thanks for letting me be a part of it.
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for coming. Molly, we got time for a couple more questions. Yes?
Yes, we have 5 more minutes if anyone else has any questions in the audience or comments. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hey, Molly, it's Andrew. How are you? Hey, Rob. Great job.
Andrew Clark, how are you, sir?
I'm so proud of everyone for putting this on, and Molly for giving us a shot in the arm with the reentry priorities for Mayor Ganem's comments. I just wanted to kind of give some bit of perspective from my vantage point, because we have the collaborative is putting on a Building Bridges this coming week, next week. And the first one we did was 2003, and it was from conviction to employment was the theme. And thinking about where we've come in a lot of ways since 2003, it's been a tremendous change of events and courses. In other ways, it hasn't, and where you hear people still struggling with the basic getting a job after having a background check. And what I'd like to say is the various efforts to change that dynamic has been really bolstered by everybody in the room today, and some that aren't here. And just to consider that there are statutes in place that maybe some folks haven't taken a look at in a while that are worth taking a look at. One of those is the pardons process. You know, that's been modified over the years, but we changed it in 2004 in the Prison Overcrowding Act. And that essentially took it from running out of someone's garage in New Haven to actually professionalizing the board. But more could be done, and nothing is set in stone. Laws can all change, and it just takes the collective will of people to do that. So I just want to just say that and thank everybody for participating, and Molly and Rob for putting this on.
No problem. Thanks for coming, Andrew. I got a couple
announcements.
a couple of announcements. Again, thank you everyone for coming tonight. Thank you for tolerating me. Thank you, Molly, again. Molly is now the I think the head of the Connecticut Reentry Collaborative, emeritus at this point. So there's 2 more forums to come. February 25th will be the Housing Forum. That'll be moderated by our good friend Sue Gunderman, the co-chair for the Hartford Roundtable. And we're not going to give our professional titles here because we're here in a different capacity. March 2nd is the Voting Rights Forum. Earl Bloodworth, co-chair of the New Haven Roundtable. And yes, he's the director of Myra. I know Mayor Ganem's here, so I should probably say that. And again, regarding scheduling for roundtable meetings, this Wednesday is the New Haven Roundtable. This Thursday is Bridgeport's. And we look forward to seeing you all at our meetings going forward. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you for all the incredibly hard work you all do.
Thanks so much.
So
Have
much.
a good night.
I'd like to thank all the panelists. It was really great being here. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you all so much. Our panelists made the night. We're so grateful for all of you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Have a great night. We'll be sending out a recording soon.
Be well.
All right, thank you.